The bombing of the USS Cole. It is one of the first of a series of deadly strikes by Al-Qaeda on US targets.
We had to avenge the 17 souls that perished in the USS Cole.
The organization responsible is quickly identified.
The only people out there who had anywhere close to this capability was Al-Qaeda.
But it'll take the best to find and stop the killers themselves.
We want to know their tactics, their techniques, their procedures, who's involved.
This is the top-secret story of how the CIA used cutting-edge technology in one of the most inhospitable regions in the world to hunt down the terrorist mastermind behind the attack on the USS Cole and deliver lethal justice.
Abu Ali was the godfather, the head of the snake that needed to be decapitated.
In a country where it's easy to hide and impossible to search.
Finding a bunch of guys in the most rugged, forbidding territory I've ever seen.
Highly tribal areas, the tribes were armed to the teeth.
Yeah, it's going to be hard.
It's a sultry morning in the port town of Aden, in Yemen, the Arab world's poorest country. Aden's location on the southern tip of the region makes it useful as a refueling point for US vessels starting a tour of duty. From year to year, little happens here to grab the world's attention. Today, the USS Cole, an American warship with 220 sailors on board, has come into Aden to refuel before heading off on a training exercise. It's nearly 11 a.m. The harbor is busy with small boats and skiffs selling everyday wares to the passing fleets. Then one of them approaches the Cole. Its smiling occupants wave at the sailors.
Very early morning on the 12th of October, 2000, I received a telephone call, and it was my good friend and colleague, Special Agent Randy Hughes. And he had told me in a very excited voice, dude, turn on the TV.
Morning, a U.S. destroyer sits crippled in a Yemen harbor.
And there on the screen was breaking news.
Target of a terrorist attack.
A U.S. warship in the port of Aden had experienced an explosion.
It's more than an explosion. A suicide bomb has ripped a 40-foot hole in the hull of the Cole, nearly sinking the ship.
The latest figures are 7 dead, 10 missing, and 38 wounded.
Eventually, the death toll rises to 17, with 39 injured. Back in the US, the families of the dead and injured struggle to make sense of the first attack of its kind in US military history.
If it turns out that this is a terrorist act, as it appears to be, but certainly the investigation will prove that, and any leads on who might have done it will be followed wherever they go.
To most people, this is an incomprehensible crime. But to a small number of experts in the FBI and the CIA, it's got all the hallmarks of a terrorist attack. Prime suspect, Al-Qaeda. And the largely lawless mountains and deserts of Yemen is one of its favorite hiding places. With alarm bells ringing across the Pentagon, the CIA, the FBI, the Naval Criminal Investigation Service, and the military send in plane loads of their best teams. Special Agent Bob McFadden is a seasoned operator in the Middle East with long stints of service in Bahrain and a command of fluent Arabic. He's summoned to Yemen to join a task force of investigators.
The word was to pack my bags for about 10 days, and 10 days wound up being the better part of 2 years.
And they had just one mission objective: find the killers of America's 17 sailors and bring them to justice.
Words fail us, but our feelings are pure.
And only now can all the details of that extraordinary mission be told. For it would be a mission that would test the CIA to its limits and involve every counterterrorism agency in the US.
I get word that some of the US government support elements are starting to come into Aden. So I go down to Aden Airport to meet what I think is a relatively small group of people. And there's about 7 US government planes of different varieties that had landed at the airport, and I didn't know they were coming in. The Yemenis didn't know they were coming in. No one had told the Yemenis that what looked like a small invasion force was going to be coming in. At its height, we were somewhere around 350 people.
When investigators arrive, the USS Cole is listing heavily. And they have to move fast to gather what evidence they can from the stricken vessel before it sinks.
Seeing the news clips of the ship is one thing, but then actually seeing it and being aboard the ship is another altogether. Very emotional, visceral. The sights, the sounds, the smells of destruction and decay is just remarkable.
It looked like a wounded animal. There was something horrific about a ship that mortally wounded and yet still somehow struggling to stay afloat. It should have sunk. It didn't.
Aden's local police start mass arrests, seizing anyone they suspect. And from eyewitness evidence, very quickly figure out the basics of how the operation was carried out.
They were able to identify the launching spot of the skiff that attacked the ship. They were able to identify very early on the compound where the bomb in the skiff had been assembled. So they were able to do a lot of those basics pretty quickly.
Now, hundreds of US detectives from the CIA, the FBI, and the Naval Criminal Investigation Service get to work with ferocious energy.
There truly was a 24-hour operation, and it was an exceptional working element among all those different agencies. There's so much to do, so many tasks to take care of. Setting up the communications and technicians, setting up comms, secure comms with Washington, getting facsimiles up, getting internet connectivity for unclass and then various levels of classified systems.
The army of investigators is led by an extraordinary boss who commands fierce loyalty among his team. John O'Neill, one of America's top experts on a terrorist who few at this point have heard of, called Osama bin Laden, and the shadowy group he commands called Al-Qaeda. O'Neill leads his massive team from the front, working tirelessly to deliver results.
Bigger-than-life personality, very confident, articulate, very personable, very, very quick on his feet, and truly someone who has a natural multitasking capability.
Gathered around O'Neill is a team of the best intelligence officers in the US. And leading them is a Lebanese PhD called Ali Soufan, one of the few investigators who speaks fluent Arabic.
Ali Soufan is someone with Arabic skills. You know, not just with language, but a lot of the unspoken things, a lot of the cultural things that might not go into a bureaucratic report, but that make a lot of difference in building personal relationships.
The CIA believe that the men they want are Al-Qaeda. But finding the individuals in Yemen who carried out the crime seems an enormous challenge at this stage. All they have is scraps of evidence and eyewitness testimony. Then, Soufan and McFadden make a connection with another terrorist crime 2 years earlier in the East African country of Kenya. There, 2 simultaneous attacks on US embassies in 1998 killed over 200 people and wounded 4,000.
As President Clinton has indicated, we're going to conduct an intensive, unending, and unyielding investigation to bring the perpetrators to justice.
Now FBI and CIA operatives from the East Africa investigation are sent in to help O'Neill and the US team in Yemen. They bring expertise that confirms beyond doubt the Cole was bombed by Al-Qaeda.
Very experienced investigators, special agents, detectives, came to Yemen with a deep experience and knowledge of Al-Qaeda and its modus operandi, how it put together the cell for East Africa, what kind of tactics they used, what kind of safe houses they rented, how they went about getting the explosives.
The East Africa team points out similarities in bomb-making techniques, planning methods, concealment strategies and team structures between the embassy bombings they've been investigating and the attack on the USS Cole in Yemen.
You have a core element that we're saying over and over again, remarkable similarities to how the East Africa dual attacks occurred.
And sure enough, when names surfacing in connection with the USS Cole attack are shown to investigators with knowledge of the East African embassy bombings, matches are made.
Some of the same names that were involved in East Africa, facilitators and others that were at large, their names were coming up very early on in the Cole investigation.
There's now no doubt left in the minds of the investigators. It has to be Al-Qaeda. What they need is the local cell, the Yemenis who set up and carried out the attack on the ship. And then there's a breakthrough. Yemeni police recover a hat from the site of the explosion.
The Yemenis were able to find a cap from one of the bombers that had some hair, that had some DNA. Pretty soon, we had a pretty good idea of who was responsible for setting up this attack.
With the DNA evidence, the name of one of the suicide bombers is confirmed. And from that, a network of local associations emerges. Suspected members of the Al-Qaeda cell in Yemen are brought in and interrogated. Soufan and McFadden interview two men who turn out to be junior operators in the attack. It looks like the investigation is on a roll. And from these two men, the US teams extract the name of the organizer, the leader of the cell. He's not a Yemeni. He's a wealthy young Saudi who is constantly on the move around Africa and the Middle East. His name is Abdul Nashri. With this vital piece of new information, the investigators are ready to close in and shut down the cell that killed the 17 US sailors. Justice seems within reach. But then, there's a problem. To get Abdul Nashri, investigators know they are entirely dependent on the cooperation of the Yemeni authorities. But soon, Yemeni officials begin to put up obstacles.
There was a decision somewhere within the chain of command of Yemeni authorities that put a halt to the interview of the witnesses. It was probably not for at least 2 weeks until myself and investigator counterparts were able to re-interview witnesses that the Yemeni investigators had already interviewed.
The cooperative attitude of the Yemen government is rapidly evaporating. And then the US team loses its charismatic leader. The frustrated John O'Neill is called back to the US and then leaves the FBI to take up a new job as head of security at the World Trade Center. It's been 33 days since the attack on the Cole. And the US team is confronted with some devastating intelligence. Cell phone intercepts by CIA analysts indicate that Nashri has set into motion another attack. This time, his target is the investigators themselves.
I received a call from the NCIS Multiple Threat Alert Center and said, "You need to stand by. There's some very significant threat reporting coming in." this was actually a cell coming a-gunning for the investigative element led and directed by Abdurrahim Nashri. A decision was made very, very quickly to pare down the investigative element to a core of 50.
Orders come from Washington for the whole investigative force to pull out of Yemen, and a small core team is evacuated to a warship moored far out at sea. From there, the team learns further details of the planned assault.
There was consistent reporting that there was a cell or cells that would try to conduct some kind of breaching operation where the U.S. element was.
Sure enough, the method of the terrorists mirrors exactly that of the bombers of the East Africa embassies 2 years earlier.
There is a main vehicle with high explosives that is essentially the ramming vehicle, improvised explosive device that breaches the perimeter, and then there are other vehicles with attackers with weapons, RPGs, explosives, just trying to shoot and kill anybody in sight.
But to stand any chance of catching the bombers, the investigation has to be brought back from the warship to Yemen. And with massively increased security, the team returns to Aden.
The investigation had to go on. Very smart people made a decision that our security and other safeguards and measures were in place. And so, quite fortunately, we were able to continue and still restart the investigation.
Soufan and McFadden know that to get the quality of intelligence they need, only meticulous preparation and careful psychology will work.
The way we approach interview and interrogation is a rapport, a relationship-based approach, a cerebral approach, and that starts with getting any and all information available from any source about the subject of the interview. And going in with a plan, but also being able to turn on the dime if our plan's not going as anticipated. Does it mean he's going to say, "You have me, here's everything"? But no, think of it in terms of, say, a helicopter making concentric circles around a target. And you tend to revisit these topics when he's comfortable. And then us establishing up front that we know an awful lot of information about him.
In a classic maneuver of interrogation psychology, the investigators develop sincere relationships with their interviewees, who soon have to reciprocate to preserve their self-respect. And with that come the first pieces of reliable intelligence.
He doesn't want to lose face by continually lying or deceiving, so he's going to have to give up bits of information so he can at least stay somewhere within his circle of comfort. And so working on that at a consistent, professional, and cerebral basis with him day in and day out. Within the first week, we had already opened up a channel of highly reportable and actionable information about the Al-Qaeda structure, its command structure, its communication methodology, its capability and different weapon systems.
And then there's a breakthrough, and the Americans make a discovery that has massive implications for the investigation. They find out that the attack on the Cole was not the first Al-Qaeda attempt to blow up a US naval warship in 2000. 9 months earlier, just days after the Millennium New Year's Eve, an identical plot almost succeeded against another US naval vessel, the USS The Sullivans, but the operation was abandoned when the attack boat flooded by accident. Until now, investigators believe that the mastermind of the Cole bombing was a Saudi called Abdul Nashri, operating with just a tiny group of extremists. The additional intelligence connecting a second plot to attack a US ship points to the presence of a larger cell in Yemen, one that would require a Yemeni leader. Further interrogations yield a new name.
Well, Abu Ali al-Harati was the godfather for al-Qaeda in Yemen, or the emir of the Yemeni branch of al-Qaeda. So he was the head of the snake that needed to be decapitated.
Abu Ali al-Harati is even more dangerous and determined than Abdul Nashri, and has a long history of terror operations all over the world.
He's one of what we would call sort of the first generation of jihadis. He fought in Afghanistan in the late 1980s. He was close to Osama bin Laden, building up camps within Yemen, as well as the fact that he had military training. So this is an individual who is able to combine a lot of different skills.
As they find out more about him, the US investigators realize that if nailing Nashri was going to be hard, tackling Harati will be far more difficult. A hardened survivor with deep roots in Yemen society, he has the protection of a fierce and heavily armed tribe in a remote part of the country. McFadden and Soufan realize that to get al-Harati, they are going to have to penetrate Yemen's badlands. Wild places where even Yemen's army daren't go.
Yemen is a very mountainous country with expansive areas where the government is not present. That rugged terrain makes it very difficult to establish control. It's very similar to the situation in Afghanistan. The tribes are extremely strong.
CIA investigators know that with the help of special forces and airstrikes, hunting Harati down might be possible. But Yemen's president has forbidden the US military and the CIA from going outside the country's major cities. And he's unwilling to risk a confrontation with the tribes by sending in his own troops. Al-Harati is not only beyond the reach of the US investigators, but the Yemen government forces as well. As a compromise, President Saleh suggests a diplomatic solution to tackle al-Harati, and reluctantly, the Americans agree.
He went into endless negotiations with Abu Ali directly, trying to get Abu Ali to surrender himself with some guarantees that he wouldn't be handed over to the Americans. But it seemed to us pretty clear that these negotiations were a sham, that Abu Ali never really intended to do so.
As the investigation drags on into 2001, it's obvious the bombers of the USS Cole have disappeared into the sands of Yemen's deserts and mountains, and the investigation is going nowhere. Then one day in September changes everything. In Yemen, McFadden and Soufan are working the phones, trying to get any information they can on the whereabouts of friends and relatives, and become increasingly concerned about the one man who knew all about Al-Qaeda from the start. Their former boss and mentor, John O'Neill, now head of security at the World Trade Center, and only 11 days into his new job. When they have a routine meeting with a senior Yemeni official, they break the news that they believe their former boss has been murdered by the very people he was sent to Yemen to track down.
We told him that his good friend and brother, as he called him, Brother John O'Neill, was missing and presumed dead. At that point, when Ali was conveying in Arabic to the general as to what happened, we had a really quite emotional meeting. Both the realization of this profound event, the attack of 9/11, and that someone like John O'Neill missing and presumed dead in the attack. I mean, one of the great ironies you could ever describe.
With Al-Qaeda now the single greatest threat to US national security, Yemen becomes a front line in the war on terror. Yemen's President Saleh knows that his country is a hotbed of terrorist extremism and closely associated with Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. He's in the spotlight, and America is piling on the pressure.
Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
President Saleh is incredibly worried about what's about to happen. He knows that Afghanistan is sort of the US's #1 target. But after that, there's a lot of loose speculation that Yemen might be next.
Very quickly, Saleh clears his schedule for a visit to the US and a meeting with President Bush.
He's been clamoring for a trip to the United States. This is what he really wants, to go to have a one-on-one meeting with President Bush and explain, look, whatever you need to do, I'm here to help you. Just don't bomb Yemen.
Saleh came to Washington, met with all of the significant leaders, Director of the FBI, Secretary of Defense, Colin Powell, and then finally President Bush himself in the Oval Office.
It was cards on the table. It was, you're either with us or against us. Saleh didn't really have much of a choice. I mean, he could have told the US he wasn't interested in their friendship, but then there'd probably been an invasion.
We spent a lot of time talking about our mutual desire to bring radicals and murderers to justice.
The two men, both very originals, had a candid discussion about Al-Qaeda and the threat. And they reached a man-to-man agreement.
And I thank the President for his strong support in this war against extremists and terrorists.
And it was on that basis, really, that we built the next 3 years of active cooperation.
Shukran. Shukran. Shukran.
Behind the smiles for the cameras, the tough realities of the US requirement from Saleh are unmistakable. At a meeting with CIA chiefs, President Saleh is handed a list of the terror suspects most wanted in his country. At the top of the list is Abu Ali al-Harati. Within hours, an order comes from President Saleh to give the USS Cole investigation back in Yemen whatever they want.
If you talk about a watershed event, there was a sea change in attitude. Any individual we need access to, unfettered interviews of card-carrying Al-Qaeda members.
But as well as orders, Yemen's president gets backup. Days after his trip to Washington, Congress authorizes a massive package of counterterrorism aid for Yemen, and taking the lead is the CIA. At the center of the package is the establishment of a training camp led by 100 special forces from the Marines, the Navy SEALs, and units from the Joint Special Operations Command.
Paramilitary operatives, contract officers working for the CIA, former Green Berets or U.S. Navy SEAL commandos, go places and do things that your standard CIA field operative is just not trained to do. They set up a base to train a Yemeni counterterrorism battalion.
The CIA's classified mission is to help Yemen's special forces find and take out as many Al-Qaeda operatives as possible. And al-Harati is the top priority. Supporting the special forces is a top-secret group of communications and CIA intelligence specialists known as the Activity. They come ready to spy on cell phones, satellite phone and landline networks and quickly start harvesting a wealth of data for analysis in the US. On top of that, the investigation starts making the best possible use of President Saleh's increased openness and cooperation.
The Yemenis handed over to us a vast amount of information and evidence which we were then able to send to the United States for processing. So that whole investigation got a real jolt.
Now, with unfettered access to interrogate anyone they want, the CIA-led team develops a vastly richer array of new information about Al-Qaeda in Yemen.
Having access was tremendous, night in and night out. It was a veritable assembly line of reporting of useful intelligence information.
Even with this increased level of intelligence, al-Harati remains out of reach in the tribal backcountry of Yemen's Empty Quarter, an area as impenetrable as Tora Bora in Afghanistan. The key to locating Abu Ali al-Harati is the Yemeni president, Ali Abdullah Saleh, and all eyes are on him to deliver. President Saleh takes one of the biggest gambles of his career. He decides to take on the tribes in a military confrontation to get al-Harati, and to do it with his own troops. It's something he has never dared do before, but he's determined to show he's in control and to assert his authority over the tribes.
Shortly after President Saleh arrived back in Yemen, he sent out a group of Yemeni forces about 100 miles east of the capital in an attempt to capture what at the time was believed to be Abu Ali al-Harati.
Saleh's troops are far from familiar territory and face a heavily armed opposition of experienced fighters.
There was a confrontation between the government forces and the tribal forces. And indeed, 18 Yemeni soldiers were killed in that operation. There was Yemeni blood on the ground in the attempt by Saleh to redeem his pledge from the Oval Office.
Saleh not only fails to capture al-Harati, but shows the world he's not in control of his own country. With the president floundering, intelligence comes in that Al-Qaeda in Yemen is about to make the most of his weak grip on security and the shock created by 9/11.
Al-Harati and the rest of them were as surprised by September 11th as the rest of us. So for them, they had no idea that Al-Qaeda was planning this. And so when it happened, then they had to reorganize. Everything that they'd known, the world had changed.
And to anticipate any counter-terrorism initiatives, al-Harati now starts a campaign of violence far in excess of anything ever seen before in the country.
In late 2001 and early 2002 was this organization, Al-Qaeda in Yemen, trying to reorganize, make sense of a world that had changed dramatically around them, where all of a sudden, instead of laying low, carrying out one big attack, now they're just fighting for their lives. And in doing that, they lashed out and they carried out a lot of different attacks, which at the time, I think led a lot of different analysts, both in the United States as well as in Yemen, to think that the group was much, much bigger than it actually was.
Impotent and confined largely to the cities, all Saleh's security forces can do is arrest anyone they suspect and detain them for long periods. A strategy which yields few results.
The Yemeni government has just arrested a vast number of people and thrown them all in prison in the hope that the guilty would rise to the surface and they'd be able to give the Americans some of what it is that the U.S. appeared to want.
It was very, very intense during that period. It was really a crescendo of us raising our game to try to disestablish Al-Qaeda, and Al-Qaeda, with the flush of success from 9/11, raising their game, drive us out of Yemen and to intimidate the Yemeni government. Through that first year, it was very touch and go about which side was going to prevail.
Ever since the attack on the Cole, Yemen's two main ports have been closely watched by the security services. But they've ignored a third smaller port that is occasionally used by oil tankers. And then Soufan and McFadden get intelligence that al-Harati is about to exploit a security weakness in Yemen's counter-terrorism strategy.
Ali had just composed an information report, an intelligence report. And in that, he talked about information we had put together that strongly indicated that a maritime attack was imminent.
2 days after Soufan's warning, and before Yemen's security forces can act, a small boat, laden with explosives, approaches a French oil tanker. The attack kills one sailor and spills thousands of barrels of oil into the sea.
When we first heard about it, we knew without any doubt whatsoever that this was the next planned attack on a ship, in this case a large French-flagged tanker.
It's a reminder of just how free Al-Qaeda is to operate in Yemen. Nearly 2 years since the attack on the Cole. And once again, all fingers point to Al-Harati and his network.
The FBI was gradually, methodically accumulating evidence. The Yemeni government itself issued a white paper to the parliament during this period, which laid out a lot of the details of the terrorist activity, including the attack on the merchant vessel Limberg, the French oil tanker. And Abu Ali's fingerprints were on those operations. He had acquired and transferred the explosives, for example, for the attack on the Limberg, as he was involved in the Cole attack as well. So his fingerprints were all over this plotting, and he remained at the top of our list of people that we had to deal with to protect ourselves.
But with each successive attack, the CIA are learning more and more about how its godfather, the lead terrorist Abu Ali al-Harati, operates.
We were conferring every day with the special element that was in Yemen. And they were working very hard, 24 hours a day, to establish communications procedures, using the best technology and information available to track Abu Ali al-Harati and those he was with.
The information war on Al-Qaeda in Yemen is quickly accelerating. But no one is ready for al-Harati's most dangerous plot yet. It's a hot afternoon in a suburb of Yemen's capital, Sana'a. And al-Harati is busy with preparations in a safe house for an operation on a target he's been meaning to hit for years. But then, one of his fighters accidentally triggers a rocket-propelled grenade, setting off an explosion that kills one and wounds another. The explosion alerts the Yemen police, who call on the Americans for assistance. And then with the CIA signals specialists known as the Activity, they move in. Inside the safe house, the Activity finds a treasure trove of information left by the bombers. Laptops, cell phones, and lists of names. Crucially, they obtain a wealth of detail about the satellite phones used by the cell and its conspirators. It's as good as having the contacts book of the Godfather himself. And then they find out what Harati had been planning.
When we put the intelligence pieces together, we ultimately concluded that the target of the attack was a missile attack against the U.S. Embassy.
CIA investigators now realize that Al-Qaeda is facing a problem in its Yemen operations. They're placed directly into the hands of the US. All the planning needed for his multiple plots means far greater communication is needed, and that is giving much greater scope for surveillance.
The problem with Mr. Harati is that he loved to chat on the telephone. He was hiding out in what they call the empty quarter. Now, the problem with sat phones are that they're incredibly easy to intercept. Every time you press the talk button, it's like a giant invitation to the world's electronic eavesdroppers to listen in on what it is that you're saying.
Sat phones don't just give away what you say, but also show where you are. Because they link to satellites, they act like a GPS, and anyone with the right equipment can pick up your position.
As soon as the phone is turned on, NSA, through a series of classified technical means, can locate the person holding that phone. It's called in the business geolocation.
The National Security Agency in Fort Meade, Maryland, is now getting routine fixes on Harati's position in Yemen and feeds it to the CIA.
NSA identified Harati's telephone number and put him under 24/7 watch. It's what in the business they call cast iron coverage, meaning there's some guy listening to that telephone number 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
If the CIA can work with Yemen's army and send in a ground force or airstrike, al-Harati can be easily taken out. And then just as investigators are closing in, al-Harati discovers his sat phone is revealing his location, and he stops using it. No one has any idea where he is or where he'll strike next. But everyone knows it won't be long before he does. But the CIA have one certainty they can rely on. Al-Harati's radio silence puts a huge strain on his ability to organize multiple plots. And so he has to travel a great deal more to talk to his conspirators. The CIA know that to reveal his whereabouts, the terrorist only has to weaken once and resort to using his phone. And so it waits and watches, hoping Al-Harati will take a risk.
In November 2002, al-Harati is out in the desert with several members of Al-Qaeda. They had to come and meet face-to-face to have these different meetings. They were carrying out one of these, and one of al-Harati's phones rings, and he's been very disciplined for a very long time about not answering his phone. And for whatever reason, he answered the phone. And he immediately knew it was a mistake. He didn't stay on the phone particularly long, but he stayed on long enough for the intelligence analysts at the NSA in Fort Meade in Maryland to get a lock on him. And that was then relayed to different teams on the ground.
Harati reveals his location in a moment of carelessness. Just one call, and the NSA is locked on. Analysts in Washington quickly gather to review their options. Taking out Harati with a team of Navy SEALs or other special forces would be the preferred option.
Bouncing around in a Land Rover in the backwoods of eastern Yemen with a minimal escort, if the Yemeni government was willing to give us permission to send in a team of Special Forces operators, it would have been easy to eliminate his bodyguard and capture him.
But there's one big obstacle to a ground attack. The president of Yemen, Abdullah Saleh, has ruled out US forces putting boots on the ground.
The only option left to us was an airstrike. Now, President Saleh didn't want American fighter bombers flying over Yemeni airspace, which left basically an unmanned drone as the only option left to us.
Until now, an armed drone has only been used once to take out a terrorist. The decision now is to assassinate al-Harati with the new technology, something that has never been done before in the Arab world.
There had been an executive order which allowed the use of drones to kill terrorists, effectively, and the implication was Al-Qaeda terrorists. And that had happened relatively recently.
With al-Harati pinpointed and a presidential order in place authorizing his killing, the decision to use a drone armed with a missile is given the green light, and the CIA's well-rehearsed plan is put into action.
As soon as the order came in, a classified message went to the commander. 2 Predator drones, both armed with Hellfire missiles, were sortied from the base, took off, flew into Yemeni airspace, and just sat there and waited for NSA to tell the controllers where their target was located. The drone can fly up to 9,000–10,000 feet in the air and just sit there, flying lazy circles in the air, waiting for your target to appear. They can stay in the air up to 25 hours at a time.
The CIA's drone operators now track the vehicle containing al-Harati. They're assisted by Yemen special forces observing and following from a distance. With the Predator drone directly above the target, the operator releases a Hellfire missile.
The time had come to show that the US would not allow Al-Qaeda to crop up on different fronts, that if you're going to attack the United States, there were going to be consequences of that. And I think actually the attack on Abu Ali was probably a conglomeration of all of those things.
In November 2002, the strike on Abu Ali al-Harati is the first time, at least the first recorded time, that we have of the US using a drone outside of a declared battlefield. So it was a very big moment, not only for the US war against al-Qaeda, because killing Abu al-Harati sort of, cut off the head of al-Qaeda in Yemen, but also for US technology.
With al-Harati out of action, Al-Qaeda in Yemen is left fragmented and weak.
It was a country that had had violent Islamism, including Al-Qaeda, since at least the early 90s. It goes all the way up to 2002, and then with the death of Abu Ali, it suddenly stops. It's one of the very few cases in which a drone strike did exactly what it's meant to, which is decapitate an organization. If you take out the top of an organization, you leave the rest of it without an authority to control it, to tell it what to do. But it just kind of crumbles in on itself and fades. In this case, it did work very well.
The CIA strike on al-Harati is a textbook operation. It goes down in history as one of the most successful drone operations of its kind. For the next 3 years, top-secret signals technology combined with advanced intelligence gathering across the Arab world leads to operations that seize Abdul Rahim Nashri in 13 others. All are jailed. Al-Qaeda is put out of business. And Yemen is closed down as Osama bin Laden's next place of refuge.